Instruction and Student Life meeting. Today is Wednesday, December 7th, and we are meeting in a hybrid model today using a remote meeting application provided at no cost to our district, allowing for remote participation and for public access to the open portions of the meeting. We are also recording tonight and being broadcast and streamed by BevCam. Thank you, BevCam. Due to system upgrades, closed captioning is now available immediately on the BevCam broadcast and will be applied to the recorded version on the YouTube channel within 24 hours. On June 16th, 2021, the governor signed Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2020-21, and on February 12th and again on July 16th, 2022, he extended provisions to, among other things, allow public bodies to continue to hold meetings remotely until March 31st, 2023. This specifically suspends the need for a quorum and the chair to be physically present and asks our body to use technical methods to use safe public access. We would encourage viewers to utilize the BevCam streaming options this evening, if possible. As a note, Beverly has prior approval for remote participation, although through that permission, the chair and a quorum will be physically present when this act and its extension expires. Joining us today are members of the school committee and various members of the district administration and leadership teams. We will conduct a full roll call attendance in a moment for the record, since the meeting application sometimes does not display all participants. Please remember that any audio video you supply on this platform will become part of the meeting record. As such, please use your mute functionality to prevent background noises. I would now like to ask President Abel to conduct a roll call to ensure you're able to both hear me and we can hear you this evening.
Sure. I'm going to start with our remote participants, just so I don't lose track as I normally do. We have our citizen representatives, Allison Driscoll.
I'm here.
Great, we hear you. And Laurel Bolden.
Here.
Great. We have some of our, student representatives. We have Cameron Pisano.
Here.
Great. And Emma Judge.
Here.
And Zenaba.
Here.
Great. Looking around the room for school committee members, we have Dr. Jeffrey Silva.
Here.
Ms. Karen Robinson.
Here.
And I am Rachel Abel. We're also joined by our recording secretary, Liz Wilson. Here. Dr. Trocheck.
Here.
Dr. Flaherty.
Here.
Dr. Morgan. Here. Our BHS principal, Betty Taylor. We have Amy Blanchard. All five of our principals. We have Megan Hart, Gabrielle Monavecchi, Julie Smith, and Erin Sweeney, and Lisa Oliver from our middle school. And then we have Kate Twombly. Okay, I think that is a quick attendance. Go ahead.
Okay, I would like to ask Dr. Chorocek to join, to lead us in the pledge, and then turn it over to Dr. Flaherty. To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Well, good evening, everyone. I'd like to just start by giving us an overview of the agenda this evening, and then we'll hop right in because we've got a lot to cover in an hour. But tonight we just have two main topics. We're going to hear from our students, both our choral students and then our student representatives. And then we will have an overview of our MCAS results. And so before we do the approval of the minutes, I'd like to introduce Miss Lynn Palanin, our high school choral teacher, with a selection of her students. This is always one of our joyful moments of the year when they come to perform for us right before the holidays. And I can add that from a music perspective with our younger students, I had the opportunity last night to attend the strings concert, and it was amazing. These kids have only been playing for 7 weeks, and they made real music. And there were over 100 students on stage last night, and I believe it was almost 100 students the night before as well. So we are very, very fortunate to have the talent that we have and the students that are dedicated to their craft. So thank you for joining us this evening.
We'll put a plug in for the middle school musical too, because a lot
Oh,
of.
that's this weekend,
That's-
correct?
Yes, we open on
Yes.
Friday night, and I am doing the vocals for that as well, and we have some of our students here involved backstage.
And you want to share what the musical is?
The musical is Newsies here at the middle school, yes,
Awesome.
Friday night. All right, we have tonight members of the treble choir and vocal ensemble here. So we're going to start with the treble choir.
Sail away, sail away, lady, sail away, oh lady, sail. Ain't no use to sit and cry, sail away, lady, sail away. You'll be an angel by and by, sail away, lady, sail away. Don't you rock and die, you don't you don't you rock and die, you don't you rock and die, yo. To be sail away, lady, sail away. Don't you rock and ride, you don't you ride, you rock and ride, you don't you rock and ride, yo. Sail away, rock and ride, yo, lady, sail away, yo. Sail away, lady, sail away, lady, sail away. Oh, hush, little baby, don't you cry. Sail away, lady, sail away. You're my darling by and by. Sail away, lady, sail away. Don't you rock and ride, you don't rock and ride, yo. Don't you rock and ride, you don't you rock and ride, yo. Sail away, ride, yo, lady, rock and ride, yo. Sail away, lady, sail away, lady, sail away, lady, sail away. Sail away, lady, sail away, lady, sail away, lady, sail away. Sail away, lady, sail away, sail away, sail away, sail away, sail away.
You can push that row of chairs back if you need more.
We wake up again to the sound of those same birds.
Wake up
To the sound of those same birds.
just outside our window, those same birds. Wake up to the sound of those same birds.
Just outside our window,
Those same birds, those same birds, those same birds. Just outside our window, those same birds, those same birds, those same birds, those same birds.
just outside, just outside, just outside, just outside, just outside.
Oh, we're waking up again to the sound of the same birds. Waking up again to the sound of those same birds. Same birds, same birds, same birds, oh those same birds, same birds, same birds, oh those same birds, those same birds, those same birds. Just outside our window, wake up to the sound of those same birds.
Oh,
I can't name them. Same birds, same birds.
wouldn't need you if I could.
Same birds, same birds, same birds.
Yes,
Over again, we are here, we are here, we are here, we are here, we are here. We are here, we are here, we are here, we are here, we are here. Those birds, those same birds. Those birds, those same birds. Listen, listen, we are here. Those birds, I can't name them. Same birds, same birds. Wouldn't need to if I could, but only guess what they seem to be
We'll give you a holiday tune. What are we gonna do?
What are we gonna do? With boughs of holly. What are we gonna do? Boughs of holly, deck the halls with boughs of holly. La 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 la. 'Tis the season to be jolly. La 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 la. Don we now our gay apparel. Fa la la fa la la la. Stroll the ancient Yuletide carol. Fa la 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 la. See the blazing Yule before us. Da 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 la 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 la. Deck the halls, deck the halls with boughs of holly. 'Tis the season to be jolly. Don we now our gay apparel. Deck the halls with boughs of holly. 'Tis the season to be jolly. Don we now our gay apparel. Deck the halls with boughs of holly. 'Tis the season to be jolly. Fa la la fa la la. What we gonna deck?
The halls.
Thank you. That was outstanding, and I think we should just end the night now and stay in that festive mood.
And our concert, the 20th.
The 20th, and an added bonus tonight, we don't usually have as big an audience. And so I know Mrs. Taylor is always proud when she gets to see her students perform, but tonight we have a whole room full of your former principals that have got to see you now as young adults, and I'm sure this was a real treat for them as well.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Okay, the next thing on our agenda is for a motion to approve the minutes from the November 9th, 2022 CISL meeting.
I'll make that motion to approve our meeting records from the November 9th CISL meeting.
Second.
Mrs. Abel, could you do the roll for us?
Certainly. So we have a motion and a second. Let's go first to ask, are there any edits or amendments? Not seeing any hands. So we'll do the vote. Allison Driscoll.
I forget what I say. Do I say approve or?
You can say, yeah, approve, yay, or abstain, or nay. Those are your four
Okay.
choices.
All right. Yay.
Yay. Okay. I like yay. Laurel Bolden.
Abstain.
Abstain. Cameron Pisano.
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Emma Judge.
Yes.
And Zena Ba.
Yes.
Yes. Dr. Silva.
Yes.
Karen Robinson.
Yes.
Rachel Abel, yes. And Kate Twombly.
Yes.
I think that comprises our voting members. Okay.
And we heard from our student singers, and now we're going to hear from our student reps about active life at the middle school and the high school. So, Zanab, would you like to start for us with the middle school?
Sure. Okay. So cool kid of the week. So each week, teams nominate a student who has demonstrated our school mantra through their actions. Students receive a certificate, a prize, and their picture is added to our digital signs, which are posted on the TV.
That's exciting. Do you know who it was for this week?
I'm not sure, but I think
I bet Miss Trombley can help.
like Martin is Charlie.
All right, well, thank you. Cameron, would you like to tell us about the high school?
Yep. Okay, so seniors have started to plan their senior internship or research a project for their reach during today's advisory. There has been a representative from SNHU. Students were able to visit. He was talking about ROTC opportunities in college if they were interested in it. Juniors have met with their guidance counselors in small groups to discuss post-secondary options, their junior year timeline, and exploration time to research careers in colleges en ambiance. And lastly, guidance counselors have presented to freshmen My Future Career Success classes, discussing career clusters, BHS career pathways, and Essex Tech After Dark program.
Thank you very much. Emma Judge?
Yeah, so today in advisory, we went over like the REACH internship, and we talked, and at least in my advisory, because a lot of us plan on doing projects just because of our schedule. So we talked a lot about that and the requirements. Tomorrow is the senior award breakfast, so that should be fun to celebrate all of our accomplishments. And then my club World of Difference, we're working on kind of restarting again, making the Beverly High School a No Place for Hate certified school. And then next week starts the Senior Breakfast Club, where seniors from Beverly High School will go sit with seniors through like the Beverly Council on Aging and kind of just sit down and have breakfast. So that should be fun, and that starts next week, and it will be like monthly.
Oh, that's wonderful. Would love to have updates about that. We like the connection between school and community. I'm on. And we did have two other middle school representatives, but the post was here in my way, and I didn't see them sitting in the audience. So if you want to come forward so we can all see you. Jaden, would you like to share with us your update?
So the 6th grade recently completed a Penny Wars fundraiser to support a nature's classroom. After weeks of lively competition among the grade 5 houses, Team Isabindi won and was awarded 100 points for their house. A total of $2,003 was raised, creating a grand total of $9,597.
That's exciting. Good job. Julia.
Over April break, some of the 8th grade students have the opportunity to go on a trip to Puerto Rico. This is a way for students who are taking Spanish to learn about the culture and experience a Spanish-speaking environment. The trip lasts 5 days, and students will stay in a hotel room with 2 or 3 other students. Students will explore different parts of Puerto Rico, like the city of San Juan and a national forest. They will get to experience many immersive experiences.
That sounds pretty exciting. Are you going to go? Thank you all for your updates. Any questions for our students? Ms. Robinson?
Did you say Penny Wars raised almost $10,000?
So I'll piggyback on that. So we raised $2,003 just with Penny Wars, just with collecting change. And then the grand total of that plus Boo Bash is almost $10,000. And another event coming up next Friday, a holiday party that we're hoping to continue to raise money during that holiday.
That's
amazing.
fabulous. Yeah, on a short
We have some
turnaround.
hard-working grade 6 staff.
I think there's some really motivated people there.
Yes, we do. Well, yes, yeah.
Okay, so now I'd like to move on to do our MCAS results. I just came back from a short leave on Monday, and so I apologize you didn't have this sooner to look at it more in depth. But if anybody wants to sit with me after tonight or have questions once you've had a chance to digest the data more, I'd be more than glad to sit with you. I also printed out some hard copies if anybody wants a hard copy to take notes on. We did approach this a little bit differently this year. As you'll see, all of our principals are here in the audience with us, and they've all done deep dives on their individual school data. But this was really kind of a reset year, and it sets a new benchmark. And so we thought it would be more helpful to see where Beverly stood grade level wise compared to state data, where it's a new benchmark, and we've all been through the pandemic together, to see where we were similar, where we may not have had as deep a loss, and where we may have had a greater loss. And so just to refresh people's memories, we had before this past spring, the last full administration of MCAS was in 2019. There was no MCAS administered for grades 3 through 8 or for the high school in 2020. In 2021, which is a lot of the data you'll see 2022 compared to, but it's not really a good way to look at a comparison. I kind of think of it more of a formative assessment or a mid-cycle check. And it was really done so that we could see where the slide had started, and if it happened in the first year of the pandemic, did it happen in the second year, did we continue to slide, or did we make some recovery? And the reason that it's not really comparable data is that grades 3 through 8 only took half a test. It was a reduced test for both English and math. And the high school did have a full test. However, it was not required for students to take it, so most of the data that you'll see and the students that did were doing it for the Abigail and John Adams scholarships. And so then this past spring was the first full administration in both grades 3 through 8 and grade 10. So just to put some reference around that, students last year in the spring in grade 10 that had taken that full MCAS may not have done a full MCAS since grade 7. And so many of the slides that you'll see tonight were actually a presentation that we got from the Department of Education that told us and showed us results on a state level. And then what we will do is look at where our Beverly results are in the same reference points to where the state was. So in summary, across the state, what we were looking at in 2022 was mixed results when they said compared, but it's really, remember, the comparison is, did we continue to decline? Did we recover? They're not truly comparable scores, you know. But what we did see was that math scores increased this past spring. English language arts scores declined across the state, and science recognized a slight increase. What the state has acknowledged is that when we compare these pre-pandemic levels, we still have a long way to go across all subject areas and student groups to fully recover and to be back at the levels we were at in 2019. One of the things that stood out in the spring results was that there was an impact of lower writing scores, and that the number of test takers, one of the reasons that those scores dropped were that a number of test takers received a 0 on that, which means they didn't attempt it, which was one of the things that we saw across the board around stamina, and that we're still working on rebuilding student stamina for academic work. In 2019, only 19% of students taking the writing part of the test scored a 0. That went up to 31%. So when you're thinking, that's almost a third of the students that took that test. Early literacy also presented challenges, which makes sense when you think about the fact that when you're looking at grades 2 and 3, many of those students missed early foundational reading skills and or did not attend preschool because parents opted to keep them home, or schools closed for large periods of time. And student absenteeism across the board had an impact on scores. So how does our summary look like in Beverly? In 2022, we also showed mixed results. We mirrored many of the state things. Scores, we increased in our math scores. Our ELA scores declined with the exception of grades 5 and grade 8. Science scores increased significantly at grade 7, but declined pretty significantly at grade 8. When we compared these results to pre-pandemic levels, we also have a way to go across all of our subject areas. We know we were not where we wanted to be in 2019. We were still on a growth trajectory. And that also impacts all of our subgroups before we've fully recovered any learning losses. We will also see that, though, that there were some very encouraging signs with a strong recovery already in several of our areas. In ELA, the two focus areas for improvement include writing and early literacy challenges, as I just described, and that was because of delayed foundational skills and varying levels of preschool experiences. We also saw the data reinforced what we were already knowing, and we saw on a daily basis within our classrooms, and our teachers saw, and we reviewed in our data meetings. And so in many ways, the data just reinforced that the greatest impact, in which we predicted, was that the pandemic impacted grades 3, 7, and 8 significantly. And this is going to also have an impact in grade 10 that now has a dual impact, because they have the burden of having to have students pass in order to graduate. And so they need to recover from both an achievement standpoint and also meeting learning gaps from students coming up from middle school that may have gaps in their learning. And student absenteeism also was a challenge for us when we looked at recovery efforts. So I'm showing you data in two different ways because some people prefer a visual format and then others will like the chart format. But this really is to show you that in ELA for grades 3 through 8, we very much mirrored the state results. And you'll also see, and the principals can attest to the fact that we've spoken about, we're planning, I'm working with coaches as well. One of our biggest challenges is that partially meeting category, and it is for the state as well. So that is where students are meeting some expectations, but not meeting all of them. And that is what will bring us to the next level of where we want to be. And so our real focus needs to be in those students that are just missing in the upper partially meeting category. That could be a matter of just 1 or 2 questions. And so we need to really dig deeply into the standards to find out what are the areas that they are missing, and we will be able to get them to the next level. And that holds true for the high school as well. We very much mirrored achievement levels at the state level. For both the state and for us, our partially meeting category is much too high, and we want to move some of those students from the meeting up into the exceeding categories. So this chart will show you, I'm going to explain it first, and then I'll walk through some of the data. These were the scores for the state for students that are meeting and exceeding. That's what the M and the E stand for. And they looked at data in 2019, the state data in 2021, this past spring in 2022, and then they looked at the change so that you could start to see where the decline or the loss happened. Did it happen in the first year of the pandemic? Did it happen in the second year? Was there loss in both years? And for our purposes, the blue columns are, and the orange numbers are the Beverly data, and the black column is the state data. And so we're going to focus mainly on the green columns today. And where you see pink with the plus sign, that shows that some recovery has already occurred. And that we are moving, we stopped any slide, and we've started to move back towards where we were. So for an example, I will look at grade 3 because that has the biggest significance of loss at the elementary level. We were significantly above the state level in 2019. We were at 65% meeting and exceeding, whereas the state was at 56%. Now, throughout all of this, we stayed above the state average. However, you'll see that our bigger drop came in the year 21-22, and then we have started to slow that and move back together again. And when you look at what happened, and you want to put it in perspective, the 65 and 62, That was when we decided to keep our elementary schools students in every day, even though they were here in the mornings only. They were focusing on reading and math. And so they would have also received kindergarten, grades 1, some of them grades 2. And so they had received some of the foundational skills that we were concerned about. And so it makes sense that it was the following year, students that came in 2022, where we saw the more significant drop. But if you look in that last column, when you look at grades 4, 5, and 6, although there was a loss, the loss was much less than it was statewide. And then we move to grades 7 and 8 is where we saw the biggest impact. And if you think about that, when you look at middle school, we had a hybrid schedule, which we know was not an ideal model for middle school students, especially with their social development and the fact that they're still not, many of them, totally independent learners. I think that's one of the reasons when we look at high school, you'll see that the loss was much less significant, because the older the students were, they can be more independent learners and get on the remote learning and do their schedule. And so the loss at grade 10 is much less than we saw at grade 7 and 8. That will be a loss that the high school has to plan for, though, because there will be learning gaps for the next several years moving forward. So when we do look at grade 10, in 2019, we were at 58%. We actually went up at the 21. But again, remember, the students that were taking the test, they chose to take the test. So that will have an impact on scores, because you can see that it went up at the state level as well. And so we had the rebound, then we had a decline last year. But our overall, when you look at the change from 2019 to 2022, it's just a slight decrease as to where we were pre-pandemic. Any questions about that? Dr. Silva?
I'm curious to know, during the time when there was remote teaching, in retrospect, was there any comment from the teachers or the testing results where you thought you were moving in this direction in terms of competence?
Well, I think when we look across the trends across the board, in-person instruction was the best. The students that were in person with the teacher in school, there's a direct correlation between absenteeism and the performance on the spring MCAS test.
Yeah,
that was the gold standard.
I'm just wondering, I mean, I think the remote teaching is great.
Yeah.
But if you're able to take measurements during that period while you're providing remote teaching and make changes to basically use it as a functional option, and be able to make those changes to make it productive, as opposed to testing it later to find out that it just didn't work. I'm just wondering if you could take measurements earlier to figure out what to tweak, what to change to make it more productive, if that's possible, or if comments came out from the teachers or the principals about how to make that more effective.
Mrs. Taylor might want to add to this as well. I think we actually did see that when we first started. It was just like a reaction as to how do we do this? How do we carry on school in a remote? But as we did it, we got better at it, and we saw better results.
Yeah.
And we actually did pilot, and we were one of the few districts that did attempt to do some assessments while we were remote. We worked with Linkit, and we modified one of the benchmarks that we were using, and we utilized it. But it's a very different testing environment when it's largely voluntary when someone's remote, and you don't have the same conditions. But in terms of I don't think that anyone is surprised by the results, and I think we were working diligently throughout the process to try to avoid loss where we could. But I think that I think that the interesting thing that we're gleaning from this is it's confirmation of, I think, what we knew and were trying to avoid in some cases, and also confirmation that, for example, in the elementaries, the fact that we did manage to have our kids in every day, even though it was for only a shortened day, in comparison, the recovery has been much easier for those students. And I think that, there's so much to learn. No one had ever been through a pandemic before, and no one had ever had sort of these conditions forced on them. But I think what is very valuable is this opportunity to take a look back at, like you said, looking back, it's kind of a reflection piece, and how do we, what have we learned, and there are some aspects of things about remote learning that we still keep, that we think were strong and positive, and then there are others that we know were really challenging for many of our students, so.
Mrs. Abel?
Sure. I appreciate what Dr. Flaherty said about the students in the yellow, partially meeting, and that, it could be just one or two questions. I think that anecdotally I've heard from parents that are extremely concerned that for the first time they're seeing children in the red. And I'm wondering if the principals or yourself are going to talk about some of the more important steps that we might be taking to address some of those, first time in the red and significant efforts that might be required.
We will address that at the end, and I know that if I stop now to do it, we'll run out of time.
Okay.
So I
Great.
will get
Thank you.
there, okay?
Thank you.
Make one more comment. For these plots
Microphone.
are great. Sorry. These plots are great. It would be great to have a pre-pandemic plot.
That's what this.
Well, the 2019 is pre-pandemic. So the data, 2019, that first column.
I'm
first
talking
two
about the bar
columns.
graph.
Oh, I can get you those.
Okay.
We
all
can,
right.
we
It's
can
just
do.
visually, it'd
Yep.
be nice to have that
Yep.
as a, yeah.
We can do that. And for math, this was one of the really kind of successes and something to celebrate. Our math scores, you'll see in a minute, we've already had pretty significant recovery. And we are solidly above the state average. Again, our yellow category is too high, and we want to reduce the not meeting expectations category as well. And we will have ways that we're doing that and already are doing it. This is for the 10th grade. It mirrors very similarly the data from the state for last spring. So in this chart, again, 2019 shows where we were, and we were across the board in elementary significantly above in grades 3 and 4 the state averages. And so that's one of the reasons that when we fell to almost where the state ended up, the loss was more significant because our scores were higher to start with. But you go over to this last column, and I'm going to go to the pink column first, because it will show, all the pink shows recovery that we've made already, and with the exception of 8th grade, which did have further decline, but it narrowed. So the loss slowed, and they're just 1 point over being back to an even starting point. But you can see that in grade 3, compared to where we were in 21, we had made up the loss. In grade 4, we had a strong rebound, and we had gotten back to where we were pre-pandemic. In grade 5, we also had a very strong rebound and are just 3 points below where we were pre-pandemic. For 6th grade, still not too far away, but now you can start to see the impact, because we know with math it's progressive, right? And so they were 5% below 5 points below where they were before, and then we see the impact to 7th and 8th grade. This is when algebraic thinking comes in. It's when we have two different levels, basically, of math, and so that impact will be heading up to the high school, and I know that they have plans on how to support students that are going to need some of that work to close learning gaps when they get to grade 9 and 10. But this is, as you know, remember, we also implemented new math curriculum in grades K through the high school. We had Zern at the elementary level, and we went to Reveal in grades 6 through 12, depending on when you were taking your different math classes. And so in implementation, this was actually encouraging when you think about the fact that an implementation of a new curriculum is really a 3-year cycle, and you can actually see an implementation dip in the first few years of any new curriculum that you're doing while everybody's learning it. But we did not see the curriculum dip, and we saw a good recovery. So that was very positive news. In science, this combines grade 5 and 8 science, and you'll see, again, very similar to the trends at the state. We were slightly below in students that were exceeding expectations, but we were also slightly below in students that were not meeting expectations. So it works out to be a very similar trend. When we look at the science data, when you look at that last column, the district change between 21 and 22, you'll see that 7th grade had a very strong rebound, and not only have they gone, made up the loss to where they were at 2019, they've made new growth, and so that was exciting to see. And the 8th grade did have a significant and much deeper loss than the state at the 8th grade level. When we look at grade 10, we can't compare that to previous tests because if you remember, we switched from doing the legacy science test and went into the new generation test. But we did end up above the state average on that test. So one of the other areas that I thought would be important to look at is student growth. And this talks about the growth that a student makes when compared to the cohort of students like them. And so when you see a range of 1 to 19, that equates to very low growth. 20 to 39 is low growth. 40 to 59 is typical growth. High growth is 60 to 79. And very high growth would be 80 to 99. So you'll see statewide that a lot of people, and that's why it's typical growth, fall in that 40 to 59 category. Our goal would be to get to a point where we were at 50 or higher. And we have done that in some areas, and in some areas we have work to do. And so when we look at our subgroups, so this looks at all of our subgroups, and that's why you see a range. And we can give you more in-depth data for this, but this basically shows you what the range of scores that were across all of those subgroups. So in 2019 for ELA, and you'll see it says grades 4 through 8, and that's because you need 2 years of data in order to get a growth score, and so that's why the 3rd grade does not receive a score. So our student growth percentile ranges in 2019 for ELA ranged from 44.2 to 48.1. So that's all within the typical growth range. In 2022, for the same grades, the ranges expanded to 35.7 to 51.0. And so we had some students that had made more significant growth than in previous years, but we also have some of our subgroups that made less growth than they had in previous years. In grade 10, in 2019, the ranges for our subgroups ranged from 34.8 to 42.8, which goes from the low growth to the typical growth. And in ELA for 2022, that their range actually narrowed a little bit, and it went from 38.5 to 43.5. So while we have room to improve that growth, it actually did make growth over the 2019 for our subgroups. And one of the things that stands out there is for our groups such as like special education and for ELL, even though the high school was on a hybrid schedule, those special subgroups were in school every day. And I think that's why you saw the impact to an increase in the growth there, which goes back to the best thing for kids is to be in school with the teacher in person. In 2019, for math, grades 4 through 8, the range was 38.1 to 48.5. So again, the upper end of low growth to the range of typical growth. And in 2022, that range was very broad, and that went from 34.6 up to 57.7, which is a very strong growth. And then 2019 for math, the range was 29.8 to 46.7, a very significant range, going from low growth to the mid-range of typical growth. And in 2022, that growth did go down for math at grade 10. It's 35.6 to 40.3. And I bring this up, we have looked at this before, but I know that this becomes a question, and it's really quite confusing, especially around when DESE raised the score, the composite score, as to what would be considered meeting expectations. So I thought it would be beneficial to look at this again and to talk about the fact that there are really two different scores to be looking at. One is if you're meeting expectations, which is what is in the green. So if you're meeting or exceeding, you're in the green or the blue, and that's the score that they've moved to 500. But meeting expectations and passing MCAS in order to graduate are two different things. So the score to pass for graduation is significantly lower than getting into the green box. So in order to be able to graduate, considered passed and to not have to do any other additional work or to have what we call an educational proficiency plan in English language arts, and this is for the classes of 2023 to 2025. The meeting expectations is a score of 500. However, you can score a 470 and you're still in the, 472, and you are in partially meeting. However, you have considered passed, and you don't have to do any additional work, or the requirement. So if you score between a 455 and a 471, you have not met the expectation of being on grade level standards or benchmarks. However, you will be able to graduate, but you will need to have what we call an educational proficiency plan, which is put together by the high school, and it's to give additional courses or additional support. The regular coursework that students take, through all of that, they will fulfill the requirement and still be able to graduate. So those that did not pass and would not be eligible for graduation would have to score between a 440 and a 454. So you can see there's a lot of flexibility there, but it gets very confusing because there is two different scales. It's meeting the grade level expectations, and then the other side is meeting what you need to do in order to meet the requirement to graduate. And for math, you can see from the color coding a similar thing, whereas the meeting expectations is being raised to 500. However, if you score from a 486 to a 499, you will still be meeting, you will have passed, you will not have to do any additional work, you will have met the graduation requirement. If you score between 469 and 485, you will pass, however, you will need to have the education proficiency plan, and they've upped the requirements that are involved with that, so that families are much more involved, and there needs to be more communication between home and school in order to support the student. And then this is science, and there are two different ones. The predominant test that our students take is biology, so in the essence of time, I will review that one. And it will show you that 500 is meeting expectations, but 491, from 470 to 499, you're in the partially meeting. That's that yellow category. You can see that these colors correspond to the graphs that we were looking at. And if you were at I lost my place here for a minute. 467 to 490, you will have passed, there is not an educational proficiency plan for science yet. I'm sure we might see that coming in the future. So then this just came out this past fall when they raised the scores, and this will just give you an idea of where we're going up until 2030. And so for the classes of 2026, very similar to what I just said, there are two options in order to be able to meet the requirement. The first is that you earn a score of 486 or higher in English and math, and 470 in science. And option two, if you score between 470 to 485, you will meet the requirement, but you will need to have an education proficiency plan. And the same thing for math. And again, there is no option for this right now for science. So I want you to just kind of keep that, and the reason I put that in there is 486, just keep that score kind of in your head. That's where students will meet the expectations and not have to do any additional work or have any additional support. And when you look at our achievement scores, these are composite scores, so it's an average score. You can see that all of our subgroups would meet that category. Now, that doesn't mean that we're not going to have individual students that are going to fall behind it, but when we look at the category as a whole, they would meet the requirement for graduation. Same thing for math. All of our groups, our lowest one is our Hispanic Latino subgroup, but that is at 486.6. You can see that the scores, achievement scores did drop, and that reflects in the percentage of students that were in the meeting and exceeding category. But they are still within the range in order to graduate. And then for science, same thing, because the score's even lower, it's 470. And so all of our subgroups are solidly in that composite average in order to meet the requirements for science. The high school has some additional criteria that gets looked at, and I thought it would be important to share some of that data with you. The first is the four-year cohort graduation, and that means that students that start in 9th grade finish in 12th grade, and they do it in 4 years. You'll notice that the data lags a year behind, and it always does, because by the time this data is being compiled, graduation is just happening. So the spring test results happen before graduation, so this includes 2020 and 2021. And that for all students, we actually had an increase in our number of students who are graduating in 4 years. And if you look across our cohorts, they, for the most part, stayed the same or increased slightly. Our annual dropout rate, when you look at the group, all students remain the same. However, I think as you look through this, you'll see that this is directly linked to some of the absenteeism, some of the struggling students that we saw in our subgroups, that it's not the same across the board. We do have a few groups that decreased their dropout, but we also had some of our subgroups that increased, and that will be an area of focus that we need to work on. City Connects should help with this. Also, our review of our curriculum and trying to get more student engagement and finding ways to keep students connected to school. For students that remote learning or the hybrid schedule didn't work and you were already struggling in school, it became much easier to say, I'm not going back. And so I think that's why we have seen an increase. And I hope now that we're back in person and we're putting supports in place that we'll see those rates start to come down. So we've mentioned a few times about absenteeism, so I wanted to share some state data with you. And it was kind of, we all knew on a local level what the impact was, but when you hear some of the data that they looked at across the state, it's kind of mind-blowing. Students attended less school over the past several years. The average student missed 11 days of school in 2021 and 15 days of school in 2022. Now remember, this is state data, this is not Beverly-only data. 18% of all students missed 18-plus days in 2021, and 28% of students missed 18-plus days in 2022. Chronic absenteeism for students in grades 3 through 8 increased in 2022 by 138%. That's 41,000 versus 98,000 students that had absences. 1.7 million days of school were missed because of positive COVID cases in 2022. And this bullet I added today because I just heard it at a conference that I was at on Friday. And 623 of those cases were started in January, which was just 6 weeks before the spring administration of MCAS. And that's when all of the review and the kind of the test prep stuff happens. And so you can see why some of the students will be struggling in that. And this does not include, this was just positive COVID cases. It does not include students that missed school because they were close contact. It doesn't include staff absences, which we all know has an impact on student learning when the teacher's out for the day. And the state wanted to, as I think they should, because they provided a lot of support to us as districts, noted that 1 million plus other school days were saved as a result of the state testing program, where students were able to do test and stay. So I wanted you to see what chronic absenteeism, this is Beverly data, so this is our grades 3 through 8. And I put the red up there to point out the fact that when you first look at this, it would look like we made dramatic improvements in our chronic absenteeism, but they actually graded this on 2 different scales. So the first column that you see in 2019, those percentages of students missing 10% of the days meant that students missed 18-plus days for the year, the percentage. In 2022, when you look at those percentages, they're reduced, but they changed it to 20%. And so when you see, low-income students with the 7.4% of our low-income students missed 36-plus days of school. At the high school, again, first column is 18-plus days. And 2022, that meant 36-plus days. So our high-need students, and again, our low-income students, 23.1% of our low-income students missed 36 or more days of school. And we can see that that has a direct correlation with how students tested. If they were in school, they tested better on the exams. And I wanted to end on a really positive note, I think. We still have work to do, but as we know, this is one of our district goals and continues to be. And I think you can see that we've had really nice increases, especially in the middle of everything else that was going on for the last 2 years. We have seen increases in the number of students almost across our subgroups for taking advanced coursework completion at the high school. So that has been a goal, it continues to be a goal. We still have some of our subgroups that are too low, and we need to work at getting that up. But it was solid increases in the midst of everything else that was going on. So our recovery initiatives, and I will try to do this quickly because I've only got a minute left. But for grades 3 through 8, we are doing our dyslexia screeners, and we are looking for reading screeners. We've actually moved that down to pilot at the preschool so that we can try to get information earlier. We do our regular and continue to do our data meetings 3 times a year. We have increased levels of expectations for writing and for all of our subgroups. As you know, we implemented a new reading program this year that raises the level of rigor for students. We're looking at identifying strengths and weaknesses of students and putting them on progress monitoring, which is part of the data cycle. We have a strong multi-tiered system of support, and we've added City Connects into that this year. Some of our schools have added interventionists. Some have chose to do math. Some have chose to do English. We will continue to offer our Scholars Program. We're exploring different ways to be able to provide more in-school tutoring during the school day, so we're looking at different programs that are out there. Our instructional learning walks this year will include teachers so that we can start to get teachers observing and looking at and talking about instruction with their colleagues. Professional development, and as we did last year, we're planning to do a leadership summit in late January, early February, and this year's focus will be looking at student growth across all of our subgroups. Long-term, we continue the implementation of our new curriculum resources, ZERN. We're in year 3 for math and year 1 of wit and wisdom. We are looking at our common benchmarks and reviewing them to be more in line with the new programs that we're looking at. This year, we're focusing on reviewing science, and we'll be coming forward in the next couple of months with recommendations for some new science resources. We have our academic coaches that are doing an amazing work in looking at all this data and then also working with teachers with the new programs. We meet on a regular basis, and we are looking at analyzing our common assessments across the board. At the high school, we want to ensure the work around the EPP, as I had mentioned, that we're collaborating with students, families, teachers, and guidance, that we analyze our common assessment data and benchmarks to find the strengths and weaknesses in those learning standards where there are gaps and see if there's consistency or a one-off for a student that we need to address individually. The high school wants to hire and will hire a math interventionist to help support our 8th grade students that scored in the not meeting or in the D range in last year's math course. We're looking at tutoring. As you know, we tried one online last year. It failed miserably. People didn't access it. So we are still looking at other options in order to do that. We're doing instructional learning walks, professional development, and our educational leadership summit. For long-term, we are continuing to implement new curriculum. We're in year 2 for math. ELA is doing some pilot this year, at work this year, and we will be coming forward with recommendations of some new books for English language arts. And I know Mr. Casey is working on standardizing a writing approach, which will also be in line with what we're doing right now at the middle school, the upper middle school years. We're coaching and doing some coaching for our teachers and really focusing in on teaching learning strategies that reach all students to help them with their diversification, analyzing common assessment data for strengths and weaknesses, and we want to continue to increase the number of students in our advanced coursework. And did it in just 3 minutes over. But again, that's a lot of information, and we have volumes of information. Like, you can look at this in so many different ways, but I think this gave you, for this year, a good picture of where we were in comparison to what was happening throughout the whole state. And then next year, all of our wonderful colleagues will be back to report about their individual schools, and they'll have 2 years of data to compare it with. And I don't think we have time for questions right now, but if you have any, please send them to me, make an appointment, we can sit down and go through that together. If you have any specific types of data that you would like to see, let me know, and I can pull that together for you as well.
I'll make a motion to adjourn.
Second.
Roll call, Allison Driscoll. This is to adjourn.
Yes.
Okay, sorry to catch you off guard there. Laurel Bolin,
Yes.
Cameron Pisano,
Yes.
Emma Judge,
Yes.
Zena Ba,
Yes.
Dr. Silva,
Yes.
Ms. Robinson, Ms. Abel, yes, and Ms. Twombly.
Yes.
And our next meeting is January 11th.
Thank you so much, and thank you for the patience for people joining for the regular school committee meeting. We'll get started in about 2 minutes.
Happy holidays, everybody. Thank you for all your work, and I hope you have time to spend with your family and friends over the break.
I'm ready.
Okay. Oh, I just need to grab my gavel. And are we live?
Yes.
Looks like we are. Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you for your patience as we swap from one meeting to the next. Welcome. This is the Beverly School Committee regular school committee meeting. Today is Wednesday, December 7th. We are meeting in a hybrid model this evening. And let me just let Dr. Churchek also in the virtual room here. We're using a remote meeting application that is provided at no additional cost to our district. We are also being broadcast and streamed by BevCam, which allows for public access. Thank you, BevCam. With some recent system upgrades, the closed captioning is now immediately available on the BevCam broadcast channels, and it will be applied to the recorded version on the YouTube channel within 24 hours. On June 16th, 2021, the governor signed Chapter 20 of the Acts of 2021, and then on February 12th and again on July 16th of 2022, he extended provisions to, among other things, allow public bodies to continue to hold meetings remotely until March 31st, 2023. This specifically suspends the need for a quorum and the chair to be physically present and asks our body to use technical methods to allow for safe public access. We would encourage viewers to use the BevCam streaming and broadcast options this evening if possible. As noted in our prior meetings, Beverly has had prior approval from the Attorney General for remote participation. However, through that permission, the chair and a quorum will need to be physically present when the act and its extensions expire. Tonight is a regular school committee meeting, which means that we have an agenda item for addressing the body. There is a sign-up sheet at that podium, and we also solicit requests using the email address residentvoice@beverlyschools.org in advance of our meeting. And you're able to sign up to participate remotely or ask that the chair read a statement into the meeting record. Joining us today are members of the school committee and various members of the district administration leadership teams. I will conduct a full roll call for attendance in just a moment, since this meeting application sometimes does not show all participants, and we want to confirm that those participating remotely can both see and hear us. Please do remember that any audio or video that you supply on this platform does become part of the meeting record, so please use your mute functionality to prevent background noises. And now let me conduct that roll call to ensure that we can all hear and see each other. I'm going to note the mayor is absent this evening. And Ms. Coelho, you're participating remotely?
Yeah.
Okay, we can hear and see you. Thank you. And Dr. McKenzie? Oh, you're here. There you are. I'm used to you sitting next to me. And I also was a little fooled because we had seen you earlier online for student advisory, but welcome. Okay. And then next on my list, Ms. Karen Robinson.
Here.
Okay. And Dr. Jeffrey Silva.
Here.
And then looking back online, Ms. Lorinda Visnick. Here. And I am Rachel Abel. We are joined at the table in person by Dr. Sue Chirocek.
Here.
We also have Dr. Dorothy Flaherty.
Here.
Dr. Andre Morgan.
Here.
Ms. Bethany Splansky.
Here.
Ms. Erin Brown.
Here.
Ms. Donna Bergeron.
Here.
Our student representative, Kaylee Quintino.
Here.
Okay. guess we lost some of our other participants. Okay, well, thank you, everyone. With that, our first agenda item this evening is actually the Pledge of Allegiance. And Ms. Robinson, I don't think I've called on you in a while. Would you please do us the honor?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you so much, Ms. Robinson. Generally, we reserve this time for recognition of students, employees, and community members. We don't have any this evening. So next, our student representative will provide her report to the committee.
Okay, so in the month of December, tomorrow, December 8th, the high school will host the Scholars Breakfast from 7:15 to 8 a.m. And then any BHS students who have been selected as the John and Abigail Adams Scholars, Advanced Placement Scholars, or College Board Commended Scholars will be recognized at that ceremony. We are almost halfway through the second quarter, so parents can check in with their child's teachers during Parents' Afternoon Back, which will be held on Thursday, December 15th from 2:33 to 3:18. And the high school is looking for students to serve as mentors to the Beverly Middle School students. Ms. Femino, the BHS City Council Coordinator, is the contact person for any BHS students interested in applying, and the deadline to apply is December 16th. The BHS concert will be held Tuesday, December 20th at 6:30 at the BHS Auditorium, and they recently, congratulations to the cast and crew for their Stage Right fall play production of She Kills Monsters this past weekend on 4 presentations held on December 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. And the National Art Society is having their annual holiday hoopla, which the decorating ornaments and watching Christmas movies. And the high school will be celebrating World Colleges Day on December 16th, where students can participate by dressing as their college's flag or any way they'd like. So, yeah, that's just the recap for December.
Wow, very busy time. Thank you so much, and we appreciate, as always, your attendance and your feedback. So thank you. Take care of your homework. Okay, next on our agenda, we have the approval of our meeting records. These would be from our November 16th. Is that correct? Did I print the right one? Yes. I think it was supposed to be the 9th. Okay. I think those are the ones that I have printed, yes. In our packet, we have November 9th. Is there a motion to approve?
Motion.
Thank you, Dr. Silva.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McKenzie. Were there any edits or corrections to the November 9th meeting records? I'm not hearing any. We'll do a roll call vote alphabetically. Ms. Coelho.
Yes.
Dr. McKenzie.
Yes.
Ms. Robinson.
Yes.
Dr. Silva.
Yes.
Ms. Visnick. Yes. And Ms. Abel, yes. So 6-0. Thank you. Now we've reached the point of our agenda that we invite residents that have any input on agenda or non-agenda related items. Did we have any signups this month? Okay. We will move right along. Item 6 is items by consensus. We have 4 warrant items listed on the agenda with the details of the dollar amounts. Could I have a motion to approve the warrants as listed?
I'll make that motion.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Second.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. Generally don't have any questions. I will do another roll. Ms. Coelho?
Yes.
Dr. McKenzie?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Silva?
Yes.
Ms. Visnick?
Yes.
And Ms. Abel, yes, 6-0. Next is the school committee chair updates, and in our packet, we were provided a letter from His Honor the Mayor, basically recommending the reappointment of Mr. Paul Manzo to our Essex Tech, to be our Essex North Shore Agricultural and Technical District School Committee member. And I believe we are required just to vote to agree with this appointment. So I'll entertain a motion to approve.
Motion.
Thank you, Dr. Silva.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McKenzie. I don't know if there's any comments or questions before I call the roll call, but I do appreciate Mr. Manzo's participation. He obviously had been a long-serving school committee member here in Beverly, and appreciate his efforts. I had the pleasure of being with him last evening for financial forecasting, as did Dr. McKenzie, and we always appreciate his services, input, and looking out for the students at Beverly that are attending the tech. Any other? Okay, we'll go ahead and call the vote on this. Ms. Coelho?
Yes.
Dr. McKenzie?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Silva?
Yes.
Ms. Visnick?
Yes.
And Ms. Abel, yes, 6-0. Thank you, Mr. Manzo, and thank you, Mayor, for reappointing. Okay, the next item is just appointments generally. I want to thank Ms. Juliana DeGenova for stepping up to fill a vacancy on our our Finance and Facilities Subcommittee, and she also agreed to fill a vacancy for our citizen representative to the Financial Forecasting, which is the City Council Subcommittee. Due to some conflicts with timing, I stepped in also on financial forecasting for Ms. Visnick, who had been serving, and Dr. Kenan McKenzie is still working on that subcommittee. We intend to finish our report before the end of the calendar year, which is what the Home Rule Charter subscribes. We've had 2 meetings, and we anticipate concluding our work next Tuesday evening, 6:30 at the library. And then I don't want to jump too far ahead in the agenda, but we will be appointing 2 members of the school committee to principal search committee. And so I won't do that at this point, but if people are interested, they would need to let the chair know, and then we'll make those formal appointments. Next on our agenda, we had a 1-day shortage on our calendar if we have 5 snow days, but, you know, we're not going to have any snow days, right? We're going to actually, you know, buck the trend this year. And so in our packet, just so everyone has full visibility, June 28th would be our last day if we were to have those 5 snow days, just so people watching at home, playing along at home, know your summer vacations and summer plans should not be scheduled before that date, although we'll all remain optimistic that we don't use all those snow days. And then lastly, for December, we will have our Finance and Facilities and Committee of the Whole next Wednesday. So just like in November, we're going to go back-to-back weeks so that we will be free and clear for the holidays. That's it. So Dr. Churchak, do you want to go to your agenda item?
Thank you very much. I have only one item on the agenda today, and I've invited Mrs. Brown to join me to kind of help me with an overview. But before we do that, I know that the formal announcement Mrs. Taylor has sent out to the community as well as to her staff, and we have shared with leadership, and I have shared with school committee, each of you individually, that Mrs. Taylor has submitted her intent to retire at the end of this school year. She has snuck out. I think she's shy all of a sudden. I don't know about that. She's not usually shy, but I mean, before we even start, I want to acknowledge and thank and have the community understand, you know, we have been so fortunate to have Mrs. Taylor as part of our school community for the last 33 years. I think that, you know, her service to Beverly, from teaching at the high school to the assistant principalship at the high school to the leadership as the principal of the high school, has been invaluable to us. And, you know, we're so grateful. And we joked at leadership that we're beginning the Betty tour as we come into the end of the year. But she still has to finish strong, so she'll still be, you know, in charge and working every day at the high school right up until the end. But we've been very grateful to her for her service and her leadership. And so that brings us to the need to begin and look at filling her role. And we have put together, I'm going to share my screen with you, and Erin Brown is going to walk us through what we will be doing in terms of our search process, and she's done. She has a great presentation here for you right now to let you know how we'll be moving forward and what you can expect as we go through the process. So I'll turn it over to Mrs. Brown.
Thank you very much. Thank you, everyone. As she said, we are grateful for Betty's service and just looking forward also to our next principal for our Beverly High School. So looking at tonight, I'll talk to you a little bit about our process as well as our timeline. We'd like to get the process started quickly because the process is very long, generally speaking, and we want to be able to get the best candidate pool possible. This is just an overview slide that talks about the 4 kind of main phases of the process. Phase 1 is the recruitment phase, which deals with advertising the position in various areas in order to attract a diverse pool of candidates. Phase 2 is the informational phase, and I'll talk about each one of these in a little more detail as we go through. And in terms of the informational stage, it's about communicating with staff, students, and families about the interview process, timeline, and expectations. There'll also be a portion of gathering information from staff and families through surveys to inform us of what people are looking for in terms of qualities in the next leader at the high school. The third phase is the screening phase, where a team will review resumes and determine the candidates to be interviewed. Generally speaking, we're hoping to be able to interview maybe between 7 and 12 candidates. And then there's the interview phase, which consists of the formal interviews that an interview team will conduct, and then visitation days to Beverly High School, which will meet with various people at the high school and in the community. And then finally, they will recommend 2 or 3 candidates for the site visits, and as finalists, the interview committee will, and then the superintendent will appoint. So the next slide just talks a little bit about the recruitment phase, advertising the position in the following areas in order to attract a diverse pool of candidates. So just some of the areas that we'll be looking to advertise: School Spring, MASS, NESDEC, NASSP, and those are all kind of spelled out for you. They are different areas that various people look for postings. As well as we want to share our posting information with leadership programs, in particular at Harvard, Boston College, BU, UMass, Salem State, Endicott, and others, to be able to share that information with them, trying to reach out to different areas in order, again, to kind of broaden our scope. And then share the posting information with the North Shore NAACP leadership group. Again, different avenues that we haven't always shared the information in the past to try and attract a larger pool of candidates. The next phase is the informational phase, and this will consist of stakeholder meetings and information sharing. Talked a little bit about it on the first slide, but there'll be pre-interview meetings. So the superintendent will meet with the BHS staff regarding the process, that's expectations and timeline, as well as another meeting with parents and students regarding the process. A survey regarding the vision of the stakeholders, again, for the qualities that they are looking for and experiences they're looking for for their next future principal. Those will be sent via email. And then the stakeholders will have the opportunity to apply to be on the interview committee. And I'll talk a little bit about that in a little more detail as we move forward. There's a post-interview meeting, so after the finalists have done their visitations to the school, there will be a community meeting for staff, student, and families to have the opportunity to meet with the finalists. They'll meet with them individually, and they'll be able to give us feedback. The next phase is the screening phase, so there will be a screening group, screening committee, and the composition of that committee will be the superintendent, assistant superintendent, district cabinet members, a school committee member, and the union president on that committee, and they'll be looking to take the resumes and review them and determine who will be the top candidates for the interviews. So that group will get together and do that work together, and then recommend them to the interview committee. So then the next phase is the interview phase, and this phase will have a larger committee that will be actually doing the interviews of the 7 to 12 candidates. Our committee will be comprised of the assistant superintendent, 2 district cabinet members, 2 core academic high school teachers, 2 elective high school teachers, 1 high school special education teacher, 2 parents, hopefully 1 underclassman and 1 upperclassman parent, as well as 2 students, 1 underclassman and 1 upperclassman, 2 principals or administrators in the district, 2 school committee members, and the union president. And so in this phase, they will be responsible for doing the actual interviewing of the candidates. And so all stakeholders are welcome to apply to be members of this interview committee. The only requirement is attendance at a training meeting on January 25th and all the interview dates, which I will have a list of these later, but is the January 31st through February 2nd. The window for applying for the committee will be January 9th through 13th. And we're going to get this information out, which you'll see in the timeline, to families so that they can see if they can be a part of that committee and if they want to apply to it. The committee members will attend a training on interview protocols and expectations. They will also determine the interview questions at that meeting. And finally, they will do the interviewing and recommend 2 or 3 finalists to Dr. Chirochek. The second half, like I said earlier, of the interview phase will be BHS visitation days. So each of the finalists will spend a day meeting with various groups at Beverly High School. The day will consist of a tour and meetings with the following groups: student group, faculty group, administration group, cabinet, and the superintendent. And like I said, those will take place over the course of 2 or 3 days, depending on how many finalists we have. And then there will be a community meeting for any staff, students, or family members who'd like to meet the finalists, to come and meet with them and provide us with some feedback. At the conclusion of the visitation days and reference checks, Dr. Chirochek will determine the next principal for BHS. And so I'm going to go into the search timeline and just briefly go over this, but does anyone have any questions or thoughts at this point? Okay. Oh, yes. Yes, absolutely. So we'd like to start Monday, December 12th with posting our position, and that will run through Saturday, January 21st. Wednesday, December 14th, Dr. Chirochek will meet with the BHS staff regarding the process, timeline, and your current position, as well as a statement describing your interest. All this information, again, we'll be sending out to families on December 19th, and then we'll be following up with it after the holidays as well, because we realize that's right before the holidays and everyone's very busy. They might not remember all of the details. So when we come back after the break, we will follow up with another email with all of the information as well as the survey for them to provide information for us. That's it.
All right, thank you. Again, if there are questions or, comments or anybody has anything they're wondering about, feel free to ask or reach out to us after.
Thank you so much for providing the specific details and the timelines. And
Microphone. Thank you.
That's strange. I had hit it. Thank you so much for providing the details as well as the timeline, the date commitments, and the time commitments. I think that will help people make an informed decision. So thank you so much. Okay, now we have our committee reports. If I could ask Ms. Visnick to give us a report out on the previous Finance and Facilities Standing Committee.
Fantastic. Thank you, Madam President. Standing Committee on Finance and Facilities last met on November 16th. Our main focus was on the outdoor learning classroom proposed at the Hannah School. The goals of the Hannah Outdoor Classroom Project are to design, plan, and construct a classroom to be available by the school year 23-24. The proposed structure needs to fit 20 to 30 students and teachers. The design proposal includes low-maintenance structure to withstand weather for 20 or more years, and the rendering included a timber frame made of pine with a metal roof. The PTO has already raised $35,000 and is on target to raise an additional $15,000 for a total donation of $50,000. The design is expected to cost $116,000, and the remainder between the PTO funds and that cost is expected to come from ESSER funds. The Standing Committee on Finance and Facilities voted unanimously to allow for this change of the High School facilities to add the proposed outdoor learning classroom. In addition, in our meeting, Dr. Chirocek brought forward the budget calendar. We reviewed the move of 2 full-time equivalent paraprofessionals to be full-time equivalent math interventionists instead. I believe those positions might have just been discussed in the CISL meeting that was held immediately before this meeting. In an attempt to review how things in our budget work, on any given meeting, we talk about a specific part of the budget as an informational type of piece to our meetings, and especially for those who are new to FNF. And as President Abel mentioned earlier, we do have a member of the public serving with us. And so in that, excuse me, in that idea, Dr. Chirocek presented on the topic of revolving accounts. We reviewed what funds go into which of the different revolving accounts and where or how we then use those funds in the budget. FNF is next scheduled to meet 1 week from this evening, Wednesday, December 14th at 6:30 p.m.
Thank you, Ms. Visnick. I think the committee actually does need to take the recommendation from the Finance and Facility Committee on the changes at Hannah. Do we vote that?
That's not on your agenda this week. I thought maybe you were waiting to put it on next week.
Okay. We'll put it on next week. Okay. One of our 3 jobs is the actual grounds, buildings and grounds. Okay. Let's next hear from our Standing Committee on Curriculum, Instruction, and Student Life.
Thank you, President Abel. So Curriculum, Instruction, and Student Life met this evening. And we were treated to our choral students who performed for us, which is always delightful. And we heard from our middle school representatives about the Cool Kids of the Week and about how the sixth grade who's going to Nature's Classroom, the school's raised $2,003 in pennies. And I think that's just pretty impressive. And they've already raised almost $10,000 for Nature's Classroom, and they're still doing more. At the high school, the students are looking into their senior internships, and college reps have been coming. And as Kaylee talked about, there's a senior award breakfast tomorrow. They're going to be a senior breakfast club where seniors go to the senior center and give them someone to chat with and talk to. And then Dr. Flaherty shared last year's MCAS data with the results reflecting mostly what we already knew, that the pandemic greatly impacted students' test scores, especially in grades 3, 7, 8, and 10. However, we're working to address the learning gaps, especially considering that DESE is raising the bar beginning with the class of 2026. We plan to use our data to target interventions and to utilize the many high-quality curriculum resources and materials that we have here in Beverly.
Okay. For the negotiating subcommittee, we last met, and I'm trying to jog my memory, was it November 16th? I think it was the 16th in the afternoon, where we met with Dr. Chirocek about her goals and objectives for this year, and then we brought those forward that evening at the Committee of the Whole. We don't have our next scheduled committee meeting at this point, but we should be anticipating entering into bargaining with our AFSCME units very shortly, as that contract draws close to closure. And our last subcommittee is the Policy Review Subcommittee.
Thank you. So the last time we met, we talked about the committee organizing the numerous pieces of information that need to have decisions made about them and delegated. So we are fine-tuning that process. I don't know if there's anything you or Ms. Bergeron want to add about that, but that's where we are.
We really have to buckle down in the new year.
Yes, it was a little complicated to figure out how to do it in the technical sense. So that took a little thinking through, but I think we have a plan.
Great.
All right,
Thank you.
you.
Last agenda item for this evening is an opportunity for school committee members to bring forward communications. No, I know that we generally talk about some of the events. I think that it was wonderful to see so many of our students participating in the holiday parade. A lot of the youth sports were the focus and the highlight, and it was just a wonderful event. And I did see the is it She Kills Monsters, She Slays Monsters at the high school. It was absolutely a fantastic production. I was crying. Like, it was really a great job. And I'm looking forward to so many of the holiday concerts that we have upcoming. So if you haven't checked out the calendars, just do make sure you have time to pop into some of those. Would anyone like to offer a motion to adjourn?
I'd like to make a motion to adjourn.
Thank you, Ms. Robinson.
Second.
Thank you, Dr. McKenzie. It's not debatable. Ms. Coelho?
Yes.
Dr. McKenzie?
Yes.
Ms. Robinson?
Yes.
Dr. Silva?
Yes.
Ms. Bisnick? And Ms. Abel, yes, 8:14. Thank you so much, BevCam. Thank you, everyone, for joining. Have a great evening. See you next